$1 billion of aid to Georgia, and I just wondered if you could comment on that aid and how you see that fitting into the whole war drive picture.
Well, you know, we need to go back to 1917 and the Russian Revolution, which was the first successful socialist revolution. It established the first worker state in the history of humanity. And what that meant to humanity was the possibility of proof positive possibility of a whole different economic system where the majority is the ruling class, where we run our economy for human needs and not for profit. And imperialism never, ever reconciled, despite any kind of treaties, peaceful coexistence, despite any nice language, a temporary alliance, even against Hitler. They never reconciled themselves to the existence of the worker state. Just like here, an employer is never really reconciled to the existence of unions. They would much rather do away with them, even though they talk about cooperation, and they much prefer the class collaborationist leadership of the unions than, you know, what the kind of leaders they had in the history of labor history in the United States. So they never accepted the existence of the Soviet Union. They were always, their agenda was always the destruction of the Soviet Union, what Reagan called the evil empire, as if he was one to talk about evil empires. So, and they finally were able, through a variety of means, through constant economic, internal and external economic sabotage, and by forcing the Soviet Union to spend such a huge amount of the wealth that the workers produced, had to go to a military budget so that the Soviet Union could defend itself from the most heavily armed military empire in the history of the world. And the Soviet Union did, and there were mistakes too. There was a bureaucratic leadership. Workers had legitimate grievances. And this revolution took place in a very technologically behind capitalist country. In fact, most of the country hadn't even advanced to capitalism. It was still feudalism. So they, you know, tried to catch up and provide a better standard of living than the advanced capitalist countries. It was a struggle. And many workers in the Soviet Union, you know, would look to the West and think things were better. So for a lot of reasons, the Soviet Union was overthrown, and also the other socialist countries of Eastern Europe and East Germany, and eventually Afghanistan and Ethiopia, and probably some others I'm not thinking of. But this was always their agenda, and they also would stir up rivalries between nations, trying to foster these breakaway movements. And now, even with the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russian capitalist government, it's gotten a little bit too independent for the minds of world imperialism. So they've been, you know, promoting these, you know, puppet governments throughout Eastern Europe, and I lose track. In one country they had an orange revolution, and another one they had a rose revolution, and Czechoslovakia had a velvet revolution. They come up with some cute little sounding name for their revolutions, which are really just artificial. Get a bunch of people to come out for a demonstration for when the cameras roll, and they call it a revolution when they put in a government that's totally loyal. And the Georgian government I haven't really done a comparison study, it is probably one of the most pro-U.S. imperialist governments of all of Eastern Europe. And in fact, until recently, they had 2,000 troops in Iraq at a time when many countries, Spain and I think South Korea, a lot of countries that participate pulled their troops back. And then little Georgia, which is trying to get into the NATO alliance without any kind of economic and political advantage, they've kept their troops there. But they were brought back at U.S. taxpayer expense so that they could be there, so that Georgia could attempt to start a war with Russia. But it started over the region of South Ossetia, which is a culturally and linguistically distinct area of the country. It's not, the people are not ethnically Georgians. It has been part of the territory of Georgia. And, you know, the media here, they just said it's a pro-Russia breakaway region. But they have legitimate national aspirations. And Georgia sent its troops into this region to try to suppress these aspirations. And Russia, they saw the hand of imperialism, so they sent their troops into Georgia. And so they had, you know, as much right to do as Georgia had to send its troops, or that the U.S. has its right to send troops anywhere. So
right.
I mean, it's just the hypocrisy coming from the lips of Bush and Condoleezza Rice and all those about a horrible, horrible thing to attack Georgian sovereignty and blah, blah, blah. It's just nauseating when you look at what the U.S. is doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, and who knows where else they'll be going into in the next year or two. Anyways, but it's not about democracy. It's not about poor little Georgia being attacked by mighty Russia. That's all a lie. And they may, you know, if they're profiting from it already, you know, we don't know where it's going to go. It could be the next big conflict, or maybe the U.S. doesn't feel it strong enough to attack Russia right now when it's got all these other battles going on around the world. But we need to understand all this from the, you know, we need to understand it in the context of the collapse of the Soviet Union and what a tremendous boost that was to the world imperialism, and that all of these wars that have happened since then have been that much easier because none of these countries had the Soviet Union to defend them. It was a serious setback.